Hey guys, welcome back to the Leaders Lab podcast. I'm your host, Ken Eslick, and I am super excited to have back with us Michele Molitor. And then I just realized before I announce Michele, my producer is going to kill me if I don't remind you guys to rate the show and review it on iTunes if you could. But back to Michele, more importantly, Michele is back with us. She was on with us in one of our very early shows, so almost a year ago. And so let me properly introduce Michele again, and then we'll get into the topic for today. So Michele is the CEO and founder of Nectar Consulting, co-author of the best-selling book, Breakthrough Healing. And Michele works with executives and entrepreneurs, bringing over 25 years of experience, intuitive insights, and strategic business savvy to your success. Her clients have dubbed her the mind detective because she's an expert at helping high achieving professionals remove blocks created by imposter syndrome, anxiety, overwhelm, and burnout. And that's actually how you and I came to know each other, Michele, back in the day. Was I had some rewiring that needed to be done. So 3-4 years ago, that's how we connected. But so like she did with me, she assists her clients to achieve greater clarity and confidence so they can be more productive and satisfied while amplifying their success with greater ease and balance. As a nationally recognized speaker, certified executive coach, rapid transformational therapy, RTT, and heart healing practitioner, consultant, trainer, and writer, Michele's passion for amplifying your natural talent and leadership capacity is conveyed through all aspects of her work and writing. And the reason we had you back today, Michele, I'm so glad to have you back. We're going to talk about how to communicate with dignity, both in the workplace and in our personal lives. Welcome back, Michele.
Thanks, Ken, for having me. Sorry for the big mouthful. I should have sent
It's
you
a,
the shorter bio. That's all right.
it's okay. And I'm also just a moronic reader anyway. I'm like one of those guys that if I was on TV and they had a cue card, I'd probably just read whatever's on the cue card, like Ron Burgundy. So anyway, welcome back, and I'm excited to reconnect with you on this. I know that you've been helping impact a lot of companies and a lot of people personally. With some of the workshops you've been doing. The one we're going to talk about today is communicating with dignity. Can you maybe give me the preface for this and how you got involved with it?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it all started with another podcast interview.
Oh,
I was
cool.
invited to be on a podcast called the Dignity Dialogues with Joe Kettinger, who is the inventor of this tool that we'll be talking about today called Dignify. And essentially, it all came about of him learning, trying to figure out how to better communicate with his stepson, and this whole platform was created from there. And he's been utilizing it with companies all over the world for the last 15 years. But essentially, what I've learned through all my research, Ken, is that at the heart of conflict is when our dignity is violated. This is based on the work of Donna Hicks, who's an international conflict negotiator. And she realized that anytime our sense of value and worth is violated, it actually creates a physical, visceral reaction as if we're being attacked, right? Our amygdala gets all up in arms trying to protect us. And so we unconsciously violate the dignity of others around us all the time because we simply don't understand people as deeply as we could. And so this work allows us to have a structured conversation that helps me understand your core emotional drivers in an unemotional way, and creates a guided path for people to take, whether it's peer to peer in an organization, or boss to employee, or partner to partner, at home or at work. So I found it to be one of the most unique tools, because it enables for these richer, deeper conversations that allow us to see each other authentically, to connect at a deeper heart to heart level, not in a touchy feely emotional ooey gooey way. That's not what I'm saying, but it allows us to see the genuineness of each person that we're working with on a day-to-day basis, so that communications and expand, collaboration goes up, productivity is enhanced, and conflict and misinterpretations go way down.
Well, I think
So
it comes from a lot, like, you know me, I'm kind of a assessment junkie, and it sounds like this is another tool in the toolkit. And in this case, maybe that it's like I may have an impression. In fact, I do. We all have impressions, right, of what we think someone needs or wants, right? So I know you for the past few years, and we've worked together, and so I have an impression of what I think might be important to you, but I have no way of knowing if I'm correct or not, right? I mean, it's a
exactly.
guess.
Right.
Um, yeah, and so I'm making assumptions in the way I interact with you and the way I behave with you based on really my model of the world and how the information I've downloaded from you plays into that, right?
Exactly. And we all do it every single day. It's how we move through the world, right? We have
Sure.
to figure things out as we go. And all the assumptions that we're making are based on our past experiences, right? You have a past
Right.
experience of me, so you see me through a particular filter and lens. But woven into that past experience is also everything that's ever happened to you in your life,
Right.
right? Good, bad, and ugly. And how we communicate with each other is based on those foundational building blocks that you created in your mind, in your subconscious mind as a child, right? So you might have a particular trigger point to something I say or something I do that I am completely unaware of, right? We could be talking, having a lovely conversation, and all of a sudden I say something that triggers one of those unconscious points in you that has your amygdala go, "Oh, this isn't safe." And suddenly I'm just noticing your demeanor just changed. You're a little more frustrated, you're a little more angry with me, and I have no idea why, right?
Right.
So the Dignify philosophy is a way of helping us understand each other instead of making misassumptions and misinterpretations of those things. Like, oh, well, you just have a different understanding or a different perspective of this thing that we were talking about, right? And by lowering those miscommunications and misinterpretations, it helps people feel safe. It creates
Mm-hmm.
greater psychological safety in any kind of relationship, whether it's personal or professional.
So, did you come out of the conversation with the inventor of this as kind of, hey, I want to test myself? Was that the first thing you did? Was take the training, and if you did, were there any surprises in what came up on what's important for you, or did it kind of nail you spot on when you did the assessment?
So after doing this interview with him, because he asked me to take the assessment prior to the interview,
Oh, okay,
right?
cool.
I was like,
Okay,
oh, okay, sure. I love a good assessment, right? And then I was like, huh, this is really fascinating. I have mine right here next to me. I have it on my desk, right? It's
okay,
a little
cool.
printout that people can have. Um, and we had a conversation after that. And Joe's mission is to create greater acceptance in an unaccepting world. And that really struck my heart, Ken. I was like, ooh, you're speaking my language.
Mhm.
How do I use this? Right. So I've gone on to get trained and certified in utilizing this tool and in training organizations with it. And the ahas that I've had, I just had one this morning actually, because it gives you, we are having a training and it gives you your top 5 dignity traits, your top 5 emotional drivers and how you define them, but then it also gives you the stressed traits. So if you're stressed, how are you showing up if you're not showing up in your authentic self? So for example, one of mine is optimistic,
Mhm.
right? But the stressed version of that is defined as tunnel vision. And one of the gals in the training was like, tunnel vision, I don't know that that resonates with me. And I said, well, let me give you an example. I know that when I'm on working on a project, I get very tunnel vision. I'm like, I'm super determined and tenacious to get things done. And that can land over there for someone else as intense,
Yeah.
annoying, or fill in the blank, right? But it's not an intentional, it's not my intention to be annoying or that intense for other people. It's just how I'm wired. So it's about creating that understanding of what does that look like for people when they're in their authentic traits or in their even in their stress traits, so that we can treat each other with greater compassion and understanding.
Does it also then give you some personal feedback on, hey, Michele, since you have this tendency to go into tunnel vision under stress, you might want to be aware that that's going to make some people feel like, you're going to lose rapport. You're going to seem maybe more introverted, right? And be aware of some of these traits and how they're going to impact your team. Does it give you some coaching like that as well?
Yes, it does. So it literally walks you through, like, this is how this can land for other people and things to be mindful of in your own impact. So that's why I love it so much, and why I wanted to share it with you, because it's a great tool for leaders to better
Sure.
understand the impact that they're having unconsciously, and where they're unconsciously dinging the dignity of people they work with, right? So when you can see, like, oh, I just said something that is contrary to your perspective on this. Let me clarify that a little bit more. One of the other things about it is it literally asks you, how do you want to be treated and how don't you want to be treated?
Right.
And we don't often ask each other that. How often has a boss ever said to you, well, don't treat me like this, Ken, or
Right.
or do treat me this way? I mean, it seems so fundamental, but it's a way of having getting the pink elephant out of the room, if you will, because you're
Sure.
just like, this is the way I prefer to be treated with dignity, and this is where you're violating my dignity by treating me this way.
Yeah, I feel like this is a deeper, much deeper dive, a deeper emotional dive, certainly than like the disc profile. But on the disc, one thing that I like about it is the disc does talk about under normal conditions versus under duress, right, or stress, or whatever you want to call it. And or I think they call it a natural versus adaptive style, right? So the adaptive
Mm-hmm.
style is what kicks in when stuff hits the fan. And like what you were saying earlier about the tunnel vision, it's really funny because I would have worded it differently for myself, but it's the same outcome, which is I'm also pretty optimistic. I also like to, let's get it done. Let's work hard, but let's do it with a smile and it's all good. And then if we're up against something, I don't get rude or anything like that. I guess I might be able to be perceived that way, but I get very task oriented, like you're saying. I'll get very,
Mm-hmm.
all right, here's what we got to do, right? And because to me, the way out of stress is a plan, right? Stress is just a high achiever's word for fear anyway, right? So the way out of fear is a plan. What are we going to do to get out of this situation that we're in, or to finish that project that we're not sure how we're going to finish in time, or to, make more sales or whatever it's going to be? To me, a good plan gets you through there and lets me go back to being, the more comfortable, more relaxed, natural version of myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well put.
Yeah, cool. So, are now the way you're talking about it, it sounds like you guys are using it primarily meeting with corporations or companies and coming in and doing group training. Is that the? I know it sounds it can be used for anybody, but is that the primary use?
Yes. So it is currently used with teams all over. And they're working on Dignify 2.0, which will be out a little bit later this year, in a few months, actually. That there's an app for it that they're creating. They've gamified it. And right now, kids as young as 12 can take the snapshot.
Oh wow.
And with a new version, kids as young as 6 will be able to take it. So it will be, um, the, there's a way that families can use it to better understand how to communicate with their children.
That's
Every
so cool.
person that I've done this with are like, can I have my family take this? I'm like, yes, you can, right? Because that actually was where it was born. That was the intention of creating it originally. So imagine, as teenagers are, they tend to get challenging as they move through those years, because they're going through all these changes. And so better understanding how your your child is thinking and what their preferences are can make all the difference in the world of
Yeah.
creating stronger communication and bonds with your family.
Well, when you said, and I think you mentioned that his son was, 13 or something, if I remember right, and that thinking back for, I guess, I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, but speaking for myself and like what you're saying, most people think teenagers are such a challenge, but I'm like, it's a challenge because most parents don't know how to communicate correctly, right? I mean,
Yes.
like I just remember there being a severe disconnect between what was important to me and how I was being communicated with, right? And you're at that age where, as an adolescent, like you're pretty self-involved, right? So you're not really thinking about how your behavior impacts the rest of the world, and that's not a knock on any teenager. I think
No,
that's just how we're
that's just
wired
how
when
they're
we're
wired, right?
yeah when we're that age, and so I don't think it's the 13-year-old's job to understand the parent and what they're going through. I think it's the parent's job, if there's tools available like this, to understand the kid, at least if they want
Absolutely.
to have the most impact on them and help them to have the best outcomes, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's Joe's a great example because he is a very enthusiastic, he's a really fun guy, he's a brilliant creative, and he's got a lot of high energy. And his stepson Alex, who by the way now actually works in the company, which is
Oh,
really
nice.
awesome. Yeah, Alex is more quiet, more introverted. He's a deep thinker, right? And Joe, when he was younger, he was trying to like, hey, great job, and cheering him on. And Alex is like, dude, what
Right.
are you like, back it up?
Right.
Right.
Well,
And
all
so
Joe's trying to do is show him affection and praise the way he would want to receive it, right? Which is,
exactly
I
in the
want
way
the
he received
attaboy.
it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it's funny because I think sometimes as leaders we can be dismissive of people who don't receive our communication the way we intended it, right? Like we almost did.
Yes.
So it's almost like, well, why is Michelle? Why did her facial expression just change? Oh, she must be moody, or she's difficult to
She's
work
having a
with, and
bad
it's like,
day. Right.
yeah, and it's like, no, I mean, maybe she just didn't appreciate this certain style of communication, and I think we've got to. I know I always want to try harder. Like if I have people on my team that I know are good people, we hire them for a reason, they're doing a great job. I don't believe that if someone went from smiley face to non-smiley face during my Zoom meeting, that that's just them being weird. That was something that didn't land right with them, right? And I would
Right.
want to know, what is that? Now, if you have somebody that's a problem on your team and you've done all the things that you need to do, that's a whole different story. But for the most part, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people that you want to be working with, and how can you best communicate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's that moment where something flips. And I'm a highly sensitive person, right? So I'm very attuned to people's emotions, and I
Yeah.
notice those things like, something just happened there, and we just don't know. Like, what did I say or do, perhaps, or someone said in the conversation that didn't land and triggered that person around something that we all know nothing about, right? And that happens
Right.
all the time,
Right.
right? And that's where all of those miscommunications happen, because then I have to, our brain hates a vacuum, right? So we have to make up something.
Right.
Well, it must be this or this for that to have gone sideways, right? But we
Yeah.
don't know until we ask. And oftentimes people don't know how to ask,
Right.
right? We're not trained in how to ask those more delicate questions. And so this platform gives you that ability to do that. It literally tells you what questions to ask and to get clarification. So one of my don'ts is don't criticize publicly, right? And so if we were in a meeting and you came at me publicly, my face would go sour, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, oh, that really hurt. And
Mm-hmm.
so to know to have a conversation after that to say, so I noticed, Michele, that when I said X, that your energy shifted. And I could then have the space to go, well, one of my don'ts, Ken, is to don't criticize publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd be like, oh, I didn't know that. And then there's space for clearing. And
Right.
that way you can move forward with greater understanding for the next time. Um, the other thing, too, that's so powerful about this is when you have a whole organization that has taken this, you can then identify, you know, the traits that you need for particular roles, right? If you're
Yeah.
hiring. And so because it's a patented survey, it's not a personality assessment, it can actually be used in the hiring process. So you can have candidates take this ahead of time before they're hired to see what's the match with the position that you're looking to hire for. So it becomes a really powerful communication tool.
Is it approved for HR teams because I'm guessing it's not a deciding factor, but more of so assessments can sometimes be like you either passed or failed and you're out, right? Versus
Right.
this is no, we're not going to hire you or not hire you based on the assessment. We're just going to know how to best work with you should we make the decision to hire you, and perhaps which manager to line you up with or which team to put you on because there's going to be better matches for your skill set and personality, right?
Yes, there is no pass fail in this.
Right.
It's literally it's the closest thing I found to a values assessment, which is something
Mm-hmm.
I've always done with every client that I've ever
Mm-hmm.
worked with. Your emotional drivers are what's at your core, right? Because of your life experiences. And so when I can better understand those emotional drivers, then I can better understand how to treat you with respect, how to motivate you, how to encourage you. And as you said, who are the teams that you will best align with given your skill sets, right?
Right.
And these deeper values that are true for you, and how they align, potentially with the organizational values.
Do they change over time for the individual? So, like, if I test it out today, I hate calling it a test. What should we call it? Not an
We
assessment
call it a
either.
snapshot. It's
Snapshot.
a
Okay.
survey or a snapshot because it's a
Okay.
snapshot in time to answer your question.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. By the name of it, it indicates that it's what's important to me now, and it's going to change over time. So, what is the recommended frequency that people get their snapshots updated?
So just to give you an example, right? When I was invited on the Dignity Dialogues podcast, I took it really quickly, right? I was like, oh, let me just get through this. And um and then once I decided, oh, this is something I really, really want to use, and we were collaborating on a pitch for Amazon Go, I took it again to go through it more thoughtfully. And while my top 5 changed somewhat, the gist of them is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also looks at what's your home country. There's 4 countries. There's peace country, perfect country, control country, and fun country, right? And my countries didn't change, just the ratings on them went up because I spent more time going through the assessment.
Okay.
So it just scored them a little higher, which I won't get into, but essentially it nailed me, right?
Right.
So my top 5 are creative, sensitive, optimistic, sincere at heart, and warm, right? And I would say that's the therapist side of me,
Right.
right? When I did it the first time, I was in go mode, and my top 5 came up as unique, inspirational, creative, strong willed, and self sufficient, which I would say is more my
Driver.
entrepreneur mind,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so it identifies aspects of me for sure. And it's fascinating to be able to look at this in a little deeper way, and then understand this about colleagues as well.
I think side I guess side path from this, but still related. I know you do seminars on a lot of different things, and you do executive coaching, and you do rapid rewiring, and as part of this whole, like, I guess, kind of dignity, communication, workplace, what's changed over the last, let's say 3 years, like with COVID? Because mannerisms that I could pick up on in a meeting room in person, right, are much different than now when someone's maybe just not paying that much attention to their camera, right? They're just, maybe their Zoom etiquette is not the best. Maybe they don't have air conditioning in their place and it's hot and they're, kind of resting like this and have a fan
Or they just
blowing.
had a big lunch and they're like, oh, I need a
Yeah.
nap.
Yeah. So I'm guessing maybe the climate or environment for miscommunication or for dignity to get messed with or shaken has increased, I would think, in the way that we communicate now, because we're just on camera. We're not getting the three-dimensional version, right? I mean, so have you noticed that?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. Because as humans, we're hardwired to connect,
Right.
right? So when we're having in-person meetings, when we're working side by side every day, we have an experience of of someone, right? We have an energetic interaction with them, right? Our energy
Right.
expands out several feet, and we feel that from other people. It's much harder to do that virtually over Zoom because you're limited to a set of cues, typically just the facial expressions, right? Like I've got a background, you've got a background, right? So you're not seeing the bigger picture of the space that I'm sitting in,
Right.
or any of that. And so the pandemic, I think, has only exacerbated what has been bubbling to the surface, which is essentially a bit of a mental health crisis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of that lack of connection. We're so virtual now. We don't have that connection that we used to have. And even though we're more connected than ever via our phones, via social media, I would say it's not an authentic connection,
Yeah.
right? It's not a heart to heart. I see you, I hear you, I value you connection. Um, and so it's how do we find a way to create that connection? And this philosophy, as I like to consider it, is really a way to do that, because um, the more we see and hear someone, you know this, people like they sit up a little taller,
Mm-hmm.
they shine a little brighter, they lean in a little bit more because they feel valued, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's really, really key, to do, whether we're on Zoom or in person, and finding the ways to do that. And this is a beautiful way, I found.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of why I went there. Is I'm constantly looking for how do we bridge that gap, because as we built our team back up post COVID, we've been hiring outside the US. And so I have a team of 7 down in South Africa. I have 7 in the Philippines. And I just got back from South Africa. I just went there a couple weeks ago for the first time, and we opened a new office
Nice.
down there. Yeah, it was so cool. But it was the word we kept using. Like, it was said to me many times, and it was said from me, came from me many times, was surreal, because some of these people have been working for us for a little while, but we've never met in person.
Yeah.
And I think when you've never met someone in person, there's this thing of like, well, it's just a computer. Like one day they could just pull the plug, maybe, right? Like there's not, I mean, yes, there's a human connection, but it's not completely real, maybe in our minds or something. Like it's just not all the way there. And I think, like, to your point, understanding how people are wired, understanding where they live emotionally is like really important. And I think doing some of these other things like getting out and meeting your teams. I'm a fan for the progression of work-life balance, right? Like, do I need to
Yes.
drive an hour and a half in traffic? First of all, it's bad for the planet. It's a waste of time. It's, just to be seen at the meeting every single Tuesday that may or may not value my input or not. No, I don't think we need to do that, right? I don't think
Right.
we need to be, most companies don't need to be 40 hours a week in the office. However, I do think there's a need for human connection in a real and meaningful way. And so what does that look like? And I think companies are kind of clumsily finding their way through that right now, right? and you saw tech do this massive swing between uh, everybody can stay home forever, it's fine, right? And now they're like, come back to work or else, which to me is just them trying to reduce headcount without saying they're doing layoffs, right? It's like take
Yeah,
someone that was
exactly.
hired, yeah, take someone hired that was hired under the premise that they could work from home, and then tell them you're pulling that benefit and they live 100 miles from the office, and you're like, we didn't fire them. They just don't want to come
Right.
into the office. And I'm like, come on. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, I think finding that balance, so outside the headcount reductions and all of that is what are the things we can do to understand each other, engage with each other, both virtually and in person. This seems like a great tool for it. So do people, if they want to take the assessment, is it something they do through you? Like how does that work? Do you like hold workshops on it, or what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's pretty simple. You can go to dignify.com,
Mm-hmm.
and up in the upper right hand corner it says enter your code. Just enter Nectar, Nectar,
Okay.
and you can take it, and then we can have a follow-up conversation, right? For folks who are interested in how to utilize this tool in their organizations. Because from there we can work with your whole team. Everyone on the team would take the snapshot, and then we train everybody. Like, here's what this means and why this is important, and how you have the check-ins on a regular basis with each other to learn these things about each other, so that collaboration and communication go up, and conflict goes down.
Totally. Has this been something? Do you feel like, I don't even know how I want to phrase this question. I guess I sometimes feel I love stuff like this. Unfortunately, I feel like stuff like this does not often get into the hands of the companies that need it the most. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I feel like proactive leaders are like looking for stuff like this, right? They're like, what? It'll make us better. It'll make me better. Okay, fine. I don't care if I
Great.
gotta
Where do I
look in the
sign?
mirror. Yeah. Okay. I'm like, and because there was even a part of me early in my career that was a little bit afraid to look in the mirror, right? I was very guarded. I didn't want my flaws like kind of pointed out. I didn't want assessments that said I was missing something, right? I just wanted everything to look good and pretty, even if it wasn't. Now I understand, and hopefully have for a while, but understand the value of good feedback, right? And of a great assessment.
Yes.
And, and in fact, I can't stand now like weak performance reviews where everybody just says everything's great, there's no problem, you know what I mean? Like I want feedback, I want
Wah, wah,
real,
wah, wah, wah. Yeah.
exactly. It's like, don't waste each other's time. But I sure would love it. I mean, if this got a little bit deeper into some bigger corporations. It sounded like you guys were doing a pitch for Amazon. I'm not going to ask you how that went because that might be confidential, but are you guys making inroads, I guess, with this tool and tools like these into bigger corporations?
Oh, yeah. It's been used in Fortune 500 corporations for
Nice.
sure.
Okay.
But here's the thing, Ken, to your point, is treating people with dignity is a philosophy, right?
Right.
So if there's an organization with a really toxic culture, where do toxic cultures start? They
Right.
start from the top, right?
Right.
So if the top of the organization is toxic, they're most likely not going to be open to something like this,
Yeah.
because as you said, they don't want to look in the mirror, right?
Right.
So I know that all the perfect organizations and leaders will show up and raise their hand for this because they do want to create powerful, empowering cultures in their organization. They want to be better leaders, and they want to empower their team in effective ways. And this is a great way to do it. And those that need it the most are the ones oftentimes that won't find it because they've got blinders on,
Right.
right?
I feel like the market will dictate when they're going to find it. Do you know what I mean? Because you're publicly traded, you've got a toxic culture. Toxic culture means high turnover. High turnover means low growth, means the stock price is going down, means you've got, constant profit issues, growth issues. And, you know, that will eventually, unfortunately, that's when a lot of companies will make the change, is when it's financially dictated that they must, right? Like your
Exactly.
stocks in the toilet, so your board of directors votes out the CEO, and maybe there's a change at that point. But hopefully, for the proactive leaders that I know listen to this show, they can jump on it and find you. And so again, that website, just for me, it's dignity.com.
Dignify.com,
Dignify.com. Okay.
dignify.com,
Okay.
and utilize the code Nectar.
Nectar. Okay.
Hmm.
And we're gonna put
Go
all of
check it
that.
out.
Yeah, we'll put all of that in the show notes. Michelle, anything to close out on this before we get going?
Um, I just am so thrilled to be here with you today. So thank you, Ken, for the
Yes.
opportunity to share this with you. And yeah, it's really very fundamental to help people feel seen and heard, and to
Yeah.
allow them to share their authentic gifts and talents. And when we can recognize people for who they are, not just what they do, that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and I mean, as a leader, I'm not trying to monetize it, but it gives you better impact. And I don't just mean like output, like, oh, I'm going to make this sales rep like sell more stuff. It gives you more impact as a human being, as a leader, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Which does result in better results, of course, which we want, So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, so good to see you again. Thanks for always bringing your vast knowledge base here with us. And I'm going to definitely check out the assessment. I'll put the links in the show notes, and we'll talk to you soon, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Ken. My sincere pleasure.
All right. Take care.